Good morning, church family. Let me just welcome you to midweek this morning by saying happy Thanksgiving to you and to yours. I know most of you have probably been up several hours getting ready for the day, whether that's preparing the main dishes, whether that's getting your side dishes done. Maybe you're preparing to travel somewhere today. And so let me just start by saying this. Don't let me be the reason your Thanksgiving is ruined. And what I mean by that is don't let me burn your casseroles or mess up your side dishes or whatever it may be because you're too busy watching this. Watch this in your leisure, and I wanted to bring it to you this morning so that we can reflect the whole day on what really matters. And that's the series we've been doing the last few weeks, and it comes to the culmination of today as we celebrate Thanksgiving. Now, I know all of us have random traditions that we like to honor during this day. What are some of yours? What are your favorite traditions that you have throughout the holidays? Some of you may be that you get up every morning and you watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. That's on several different channels, and they broadcast that for most of the morning. And that's always a lot of fun. You get to see the big inflatables flying up. The kids love that. You get to hear the marching bands and see all the singers and the Broadway performers and all that good stuff. And those are a lot of fun, but it is a long parade. Maybe some of you, the tradition is to just sit in your lazy boy and put on the football games. I think there's 3 of them going on today. And yes, the Cowboys are playing, so whoop whoop. And so if you are in that world, you like to watch the football games, you eat until you're so full you can't move anymore, and you need to undo the belt or just wear your stretchy pants to begin with. I mean, guys, we've been doing Thanksgiving for a while, so you know how to prepare for the day. And so maybe that's your tradition, is you just simply like to enjoy a football game with your family. Maybe you've got some other fans or whatever sitting around there with you, and it becomes a nice afternoon of just watching football. Maybe some of you are sitting around a card table playing cards, playing board games while the food's cooking, and just all the family's just there having good fun. All of these events take place in my family almost every single year. We'd start the morning off with watching the parade. We'd definitely get to the football. And while in the meantime, we're eating, we're laughing, we're playing, we're having a good time. And we're sitting at the table playing different board games, card games. Maybe if it's nice, we're outside playing kickball. All these great things. These are the traditions that keep things moving, right? Or maybe you're the type of family that sits and you get to the basics of what Thanksgiving is about. Talking about how the English came over here and they met with the indigenous people of the modern time, and they had this great feast together. And it's been so long that the story has probably shifted from the truth dramatically, but maybe you like to do the history and go through and research the truth of what took place on Plymouth Rock and share that information with your family. All of these things are great in its own right. None of them are bad. They're all good in their tradition. So write in the comments and just let us know, what are some of your favorite Thanksgiving traditions? What does this day look like for you? Is it the hustle and bustle? Is it the Black Friday shopping? What is it? We want to know. We want to know so we can talk about it with you and celebrate this day with you. But for me, did you know that in the Jewish culture, they had to go and celebrate certain feasts? We actually did a sermon series on Sunday morning where we walked through 7 feasts that Israel celebrated. And they had 3 major ones where they all the people would be gathered back to Jerusalem. They'd go back to Israel and they would celebrate these feasts together. Now, all of these feasts had something specific that they were trying to honor, but almost every one of them all the time brought a reflection back to what God has done for them. And it's a remembrance of what God has done. And so that's why for me, every year Thanksgiving is just a remembrance of what God has truly done in my life. And I know that people say, well, don't let Thanksgiving be a one-day event for the whole year. And I agree with that. You need to be thankful all year round, but it's not a bad thing to have a day that reminds us to give thanks, right? It's almost like communion every Sunday, that we are prompted to be reminded of what God has done for us through Jesus, sending his son to the cross. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, is this idea of prayer and what that looks like. And so I don't know how it is that you give thanks, but I know that I try to constantly stay in communication with God, whether that's just me and my thoughts, whether that's, singing worship music all the time in my car where no one can hear me, whatever it may be. We're in this constant attitude of giving thanks, but I'm always grateful for a day that's surrounded by that. And I know that the traditional meaning of Thanksgiving is far away from the faith that I have. I get that. But this is a day for me and my house where we try to remember the blessings that God has given. Almost like this Jewish feast where they would gather around Israel and they would come together and remember what God has done. And that's been my prayer this morning, is to just, God, open my eyes to see the many blessings that you've provided for me and for my family. And although there are a lot of hardships out there in my life alone, don't let me reflect on those things. Let me reflect on the things that you have provided. And so that brings up this question. And this is the heart of the context today, is if you ever thank God for saying no to your prayer. Think about that for a second. Have you ever thanked God for saying no to a prayer that you have? Because in the heat of the moment, when we're praying to God for certain things, for wisdom, for clarity, for health, for finances, whatever it may be, whatever you're praying for, you simply sit there and you ask God for what you think is near and dear to your heart. And God just remains silent, or God flat out says no. And so this prompted me to look through the Bible and just try to see different areas in which God said no to people. And I want to give you 3 quick stories. The first one is the Apostle Paul. Remember, he had this thorn in his side. Some people call it the blindness, because Paul was going blind in his old age, as the text tells us. He had a hard time writing and reading and all these things. And so his handwriting got really sloppy. And so he would tell people, you know that this is me writing it because my handwriting is so sloppy because I can't see. And so he would always ask God to take this thorn of the flesh away from him. Some people think it was his eyesight. Some people think it could have been a demonic influence that surrounded his life, where God simply said, no, I need to keep this here. In fact, Paul talks about this a little bit, and he says the reason God won't remove it is because it keeps my eyes on what God has allowed me to see. And so it reminds him of what God has done and shown him in his life. And that's why God is saying no by removing this thorn from Paul's flesh. Another one comes all the way back from Exodus chapter 14. And this is where Moses is trying to take the Israelites out of Egypt. And there's something really convicting to me in this text that I want to read. And so it's in Exodus chapter 14. And you see there that Moses is getting ready to set the Israelites up to get them out of Egypt, take them out of slavery. The problem is a lot of the Israelites are afraid, because the unknown is always a hard future to want to go into, right? It's always a hard door to walk through, because the future of the unknown is scaring us. And it still does that today, right? I'm one of those guys, like, I like to feel like I have a little bit of control of what's going on around me. And when you're walking into a completely unknown future, a completely unknown environment, it is scary, because you don't know. You just simply don't know. And so the Israelites are starting to fear what's about to happen. And so all the plagues take place. God is softening the heart of Pharaoh, hardening the heart of Pharaoh, and back and forth, and also leading Moses to get the Israelites out. And you see all this stuff start to play out. And then now they're getting to the point where they're approaching the sea. And so verse 10, it says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. It says they were terrified and cried out to the Lord. Okay, before we get to the cry out, right, this is the prayer that they're getting ready to cry out to the Lord. Put this in perspective, okay? You're following Moses. His leadership has already been proven to be right. And you know that he has a good relationship with God the Father. And yet he is leading you out. We're talking like 1 million people here that he's leading out of Egypt. And so they're walking through all these places. They're running away from the Egyptians because now they're chasing after them. And all of a sudden you get to the part where there's the sea, right? And you get to the part where you're right there, and you start to look back, and it's like that moment on the cliff, right? Where you're at the edge of the cliff, but you see nothing but ocean out there. And then you look back and you see your enemy right there closing in, and you have no choice but to either die or jump. And that's the fear that's taking over them right now. And so they look back, they see Pharaoh and all the Egyptians marching after them. Probably, when we say marching, we're saying they're probably coming at full speed, because they're going to capture these guys and want to bring them back. So now, verse 11, they're crying out to the Lord. This is a prayer they're crying out. And they said to Moses, was it because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us here to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Do you hear the fear in their prayer? They're looking at Moses now, and they're praying to God. Now, it says that they're speaking to God, but they speak through Moses because he's like the mouthpiece of Israel to God. They know he has a direct relationship, and so they cry out to the Lord through Moses, and they said, "What are you doing? Why didn't you just leave us alone in Egypt? We were fine. We were comfortable." And I think that's the root of our prayers a lot, isn't it? Is that we want to be comfortable. And this is where the Israelites are. They're like, we would have been just fine serving. Yeah, we didn't desire it. It wasn't the greatest life, but we were okay. We were fed and we were taken care of. Yeah, we were slaves, but that's better than where we're going. So rather than dying as a slave in Egypt, you want us to die in the desert with nothing? And if God would have said, you know what, you're right, I'll answer your prayer and I'll leave you in Egypt, things would have been a lot different. The Bible wouldn't have carried out the way that it needed to. But God refused to hear that prayer. He refused to answer yes to that prayer because what he knows is what's greater on the other side. And I think we forget that sometimes in our prayer life, is that when we're walking through the pain, when we're walking through the storm, we forget that God already sees the bigger picture. God already knows the outcome. And Psalms tells us that God sees the heart. And so when he says no to our prayer, it's because he's going to do greater things for those who believe, right? Greater things for those who believe. Romans 8:28 is another example of that. And so when we get caught up in our prayer and we just feel like God remains silent, God isn't going to answer this, God's saying no, it's not because he doesn't love us, it's because there's a greater future at the end of this. And sometimes you and I have to walk through that valley, we have to walk through that storm in order to get to where God wants to get us, in order to maybe strengthen our character, maybe give us some opportunities to grow in other areas of our life so that we can be the person that God has created us to be in this event that he needs us to show up for. And so God needed Israel to go through the wilderness because the promised land is over there. And you know the rest of the text. Once they get to the promised land, things become great. God has favor for them. But because they don't know and they don't see the future, it's hard to trust God in that part. So when has God said no to your prayer? And as you played it out, you realize, you know what? This is a great thing. Let's talk about some of that. Maybe some of these are relationships. Maybe you were madly in love with somebody as a youngster, and maybe as a high schooler, maybe at early college, and you thought you found the one. And then you were just hoping that things would go well, and you asked the Lord, like, Lord, this may be my wife, this may be my husband someday, and I'm really excited about this. And then all of a sudden, turmoil starts to come, and the relationship's over, and you're just praying God to repair that relationship, and it just doesn't happen. And then years down the road, maybe, you end up meeting someone better and greater for you that you never would have found if God had said yes to that prayer. Maybe it's a loved one who's passed away. And you're saying, God, I don't want you to take them. I don't want you to take them. I'm praying, Lord, that you heal them and that they recover or whatever it may be. And God simply said no. And they end up passing away. And so you're bitter, you're angry with the Lord for a few minutes. But then as you start to see this play out, you realize how crazy life is and why would we ever want to wish anyone back here, right? And that their pain is no more, their suffering is no more. And although we selfishly want to keep them around because we love them and they love us and we have this great relationship, it's hard sometimes to let go. But maybe it's through that storm that God's creating something within you so that you can minister to someone else. And then there's Jesus. When God said no to his own son. This part gets me. It's when Jesus was praying in the garden right before he was arrested, right before Judas betrayed him. Remember, he's in the garden and he's praying, Lord, pass this cup of suffering from me. What Jesus is saying, and he's prayed this prayer 3 times in the garden, is, God, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to go through what I'm about to go through. And I'm scared. I don't know what this looks like. And I'm not sure I can do this. But then he closes the prayer with this. It's not my will, but it's your will that needs to be done. So God told Jesus, no, I can't pass this cup from you. You have to go through it. You have to go through it. And thankfully he did it because Jesus understood the prayer wasn't about himself. He had to walk through this. And if Jesus didn't, you and I wouldn't be here right now doing the things that we're doing. coming to church on Sunday and remembering that sacrifice, because this is solely the greatest thing in history, is that Jesus went to the cross, he died, and he resurrected. And without that, we would have absolutely nothing. And so God himself had to look at his son and tell him, no, I can't pass this cup of suffering for you. So maybe this Thanksgiving, maybe I want to challenge you with this. Thank God for saying no to your prayers. Whatever that looks like. Maybe it was no to a scholarship. Maybe it was no to a certain relationship. Maybe it was no to a certain promotion, or whatever it may be. And then look at the blessings that you have because of the no back there. And thank God for saying no there, because it's given you the life and the leadership skills and whatever it is that's developed inside of you to make you who you are for the kingdom of God. And so let's reflect on what really matters this Thanksgiving as you spend time with your family and your friends, and you enjoy all the great traditions that Thanksgiving brings to you and yours. But make no mistake, God sees you in every aspect of your life, and he is absolutely crazy about you. And he wants to see you. He wants to love you. And so let's give him his honor today as we remember him in this day of Thanksgiving. I pray that you guys have a fantastic day. I pray that you make many memories that will carry on for the rest of this life and in the next. And so just know this, that the Lord loves you and we love you as well. And we want to wish you here from First Christian Church of Camp Point a very happy Thanksgiving. God bless.